The same idea that grew me $12,817 of carrots in a 120 frost-free day growing season can grow you fresh food from your garden into November, no matter where you live. By the end of this video, I'm going to explain to you how we use this idea to produce and sell $83,000 worth of food on this 1/3 of an acre vegetable farm in our 120 frost-free day growing season, and how you can use the same idea to stretch your harvest window in your garden 6 weeks past your average first frost. I'm Zach Buckle. I own this vegetable farm where we harvest and sell fresh vegetables 12 months a year in Cody, Wyoming. So the way we're able to produce that many carrots and sell them to a very small market is we harvest these carrots deep past the first frost, slowly but surely, and we do that with a whole bunch of other crops. That's basically how we harvest fresh all winter long. We harvest little bits of everything you see around me, all this spinach, this miner's lettuce, this Tokyo Bacana. We harvest a little bit of it all winter long because we planted a whole bunch of it during the growing season. All of this was still planted in our 120 frost-free days. And the same concept can work for you in your garden. If you have open space in the middle of the growing season, you could start every week planting huge amounts of really cold hardy fall crops as long as your timing is right. And to illustrate this point, this is one of our 6 winter carrot beds. 50 feet long, 2.5 feet wide. There's about probably 150 to 200 pounds of carrots left in this bed. So we've got, anywhere from 600 to 800 pounds left in the ground, and we probably have another 150 in the walk-in cooler right now. And this is a really powerful concept to stretch your harvest window. That's how you can really increase the amount of food you're producing in your backyard if you live in the north. A lot of people think that once the growing season ends, your harvesting is done and you're just going to harvest everything in September, put it all in cans, freeze it, do whatever. But that's a huge amount of work, and it's such a waste of potential food you could be eating from your backyard. So what we do, these carrots were planted August 1st. On August 1st, we had 5 open beds in these 6 open beds. So I seeded them, all of them, in one day, and we turned the sprinklers on to germinate them the next 9 days. We got perfect germination. So here we are today with almost 1,000 pounds of delicious candy carrots to sell to our customers from now probably till the end of February. Just kind of depends. But we can harvest a little bit at a time. We don't have to harvest them all at once because they're just sitting here. And to illustrate how powerful this is, I'm going to tell you a story about our carrots last year. If any of you live in the north, you probably know exactly what I'm about to tell you, but we had a crazy winter last year. It was the coldest winter I've ever seen in Wyoming, and I've lived here for about 8 years now. And I've lived in Chicago too, and we had negative 48 degrees Fahrenheit while I was there. So I've seen some cold. And but I know people around here have worked on oil rigs in North Dakota and stuff, and that sounds like some of the coldest place to work on earth. People around here are very used to the cold, but so am I. But this is the first time I've ever actually had food in the ground during this kind of cold. So we had negative 30 Fahrenheit for about a week last year. And I was pretty freaked out, to be honest, because these carrots are very valuable to me. And the money that we make on this farm in the winter has become a pretty big part of my business because we're so small. We're a 1/3 acre farm. To make a serious amount of money, your success rate needs to be pretty high. So there's a lot of risk involved. But you know, the more you get good at this stuff, the less risk you have because you kind of know what you're doing. But that was the coldest I've ever seen. And so all I did was I had carrots just like this. I just covered them with 2-3 layers of row cover and prayed. And the ground was so frozen in here that I couldn't even get a digging fork in. This digging fork, I could not, with all of my weight dancing on this thing, I could not get this thing in the ground for a week after that blizzard, which was sort of a problem because I had customers that needed the carrots, but you know, you got to do what you got to do. You know, people understand. So I was freaking out. Thought I might have lost them. But what happened was a week later, the ground did thaw, and I was able to get a digging fork in and pull them out. And they were basically not quite that sound when I broke them. They didn't sound quite that cracky and fresh, but I mean, I'd say it was 90% there. And if you've ever grown carrots and left them outside too long, or they did get frost damage, you know what I'm about to talk about. They get a little bit mushy and they almost taste freeze-dried, like that ice cream that you get from the astronaut ice cream. You know what I'm talking about? It's like freeze-dried, that texture that's like really airy. There's like air pockets in there. When you have really frost-damaged carrots, that's kind of what they taste like, and I would not be able to sell those. These were way better than that. Like, I was blown away. I was with one of my customers at this party the other night, and I brought that up, and she said they were great, like just raving about them. And we still had probably 4 more beds like this in the ground to sell, and that's a lot of money for me in the wintertime. And to do really well in the spring, I need a large amount of money to fund employees, bed prep stuff. I got to buy all sorts of stuff. So that winter income is a very big part of my business right now. And so I was freaking out, but it turned out okay. And I just stuck with this process of harvesting a little bit at a time through crazy cold, you know. And we still had spinach. This Claytonia lived through that. There was all sorts of stuff that lived through it. And I was still getting harvests after that cold. And I've made a video about this, but our entire winter production is basically this concept. You plant a truckload of stuff at the right time and harvest a little bit every week through the winter and just protect it through the cold. And just again, this is a really low-tech high caterpillar tunnel. This is basically a cold frame. There is no heat in this greenhouse at all. So it's a very powerful concept. If you plant way more than you think you need, but you harvest a little bit at a time past your first frost, you're just increasing your harvest window. And all you should care about as a grower of food is your harvest window. Nobody cares if you grow 90% of the crop, if the crop only gets 90% mature. But if you get it 100% mature and protect it, you have a lot more options. You know, there's a lot more freedom in that concept than having this mindset of like, oh, I've got to get it all out of the ground in September and put it away, and then that's my food for the winter. You know, if you expand the harvest window, you take a lot of pressure off yourself, and it just becomes easier to grow food because the workload is spread out over a much wider period. You know, this is how my farm is also really easy to work at because we don't have to stress as much in August to make all of our money because my plan is to have income 12 months a year. And it's the same idea with your garden. If you plan on having income or harvests much longer past your growing season, it takes a lot of pressure off yourself and you can enjoy your food in a much more reasonable way instead of just harvesting it all and putting it away. If you thought that story was cool and you want to hear more stories like that from growers all over the world, I just started a free school community called Backyard Gardening 101 that there's a link to in the description below. When you join this community, you get a free 30-minute garden consultation with me. You get access to free monthly webinars that we're going to do starting in January about crop planting, seed starting, everything you need to know from seed to harvest with gardening and growing food. You get access to a community of really passionate growers from all over the world that want to grow food, not just plants or flowers, people that want to grow food. And you get access to a backyard farm launch pad, which is my 4-step PDF to walk you through starting a no-dig garden in your backyard if you've never done that before. So if any of that sounds interesting, hit that link in the description below. And so here's an example of what I'm talking about. Kale. We've got 3 50-foot beds of kale here. And this was our kale to harvest weekly throughout the summer. But around September, I stopped harvesting it because we had other stuff to sell and I let it get really bushy. So I had a huge inventory of kale to harvest weekly way past our first frost, which is September 21st. And we harvested our last crop out of these 3 beds November 23rd. That was like 2 weeks ago. And you see how ugly this kale looks? It looks all droopy like this. Well, if we had enough to pick for bunches, and we kind of do, honestly, there's still enough here to make some kale bunches. All you have to do, if your kale looks this droopy, is harvest it, cut the end off, and then stick it in water overnight, and it will look like this. It's crazy how much plants can recover when they're soaking in water for a night. You could do this with parsley, celery, basically any kind of big, bulky, bunching green. If you cut the ends off and stick it in water overnight, it will absolutely become sexier than the kale that you buy at the store. But the concept I'm talking about here is succession harvesting. We had probably 4 to 6 huge harvests of kale way past our average first frost outside without any extra protection. And it made us money, a lot of money. You know, we don't have to replant a new crop here. This is just taking advantage of something that we planted back in May and harvested. I don't even know how many times we harvested this kale, probably 10, 12 times. Okay, so when you have a big inventory of these frost tolerant crops, like really frost tolerant crops, not just snap peas or lettuce, stuff like that, just the really tough stuff, the same stuff I grow for the winter. When you have a lot of that outside in your garden, you could push it really past your first frost and have food much longer than your actual growing season. Because, you know, we have our 120 frost-free growing season. If that was my vision of what a vegetable farm could be, we could only sell food in that 120 days. You can't run a business in 100. You can't run a business by making money in 4 months out of the 12 months of the year. That's not possible. Like, yes, there are businesses that do that, but very few. You need to have money coming in a much bigger time window than 4 months. And so the same concept should apply to you eating from your garden. You don't want to just eat from your garden for 4 months if you actually want to produce food. You want to stretch that as long as possible so you have something to eat, you know, as long as possible. You know, in Wyoming, it's not really possible to do it 12 months a year without a greenhouse. You know, at least I don't know how to do that yet. I hope in the future there is, because I still think that pretty much everything I'm talking about on this channel is just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much we still have to learn about growing food, but I'm not going to get too crazy right now. But the bottom line is this works really well. And it's not just, it works with more than just kale and carrots. It works with spinach, it works with parsley, it works with green onions. I have a whole video about this that I'm going to put above one of these places so you can watch how you can harvest fresh food from your garden until Christmas in a lot of climates. It depends on the year. I think even this year we probably could be harvesting kale till Christmas. This is actually still good. I haven't even looked at this in a couple of days, but I could easily still make a harvest just for myself. You know, I don't have enough to sell here, but there's actually still a lot of food right here. Even though this looks like hell, this is a lot of food we're looking at right here. And so if you look at your plants in a different way than the traditional vision of a garden, where you just throw your tomato plants in May and then just kind of forget about it in July, or if best case scenario, you have a whole bunch of stuff, but you harvest it all in September, can it, freeze it, all that stuff. If you start to look above and beyond that and really take advantage of the frost tolerant crops, which I have the whole video about, you really can expand how wide of a harvest window you have. And if you want to eat as much as possible from your backyard, you want to expand your harvest window as much as possible. And if you don't want to can, you know, this is a root cellar, okay? What we have right here is a root cellar. This is a fridge. This is a food preservation method. It's the most powerful one, in my opinion. It's way better than, you know, even storing carrots in your fridge. This concept is revolutionary. And I don't see enough people talking about it, because I don't think there's that many people on YouTube that are growing in this cold of a climate and this short of a growing season. But, you know, if you're as obsessed with locally grown food as I am, and you live in a place like Wyoming where your climate is ridiculously short and tough, this concept is a life changer, because it means I can actually eat from something I grew, which I know what's in it. I don't know I know that I didn't put any garbage in the soil or anything like that for a much longer period than what is traditionally taught. So just as an example, if you took a 5-foot section of this bed and put it in your backyard, 5 feet is about right here, okay? This is 10 kale plants. That's so easy to grow in your nursery, in your living room, grow lights or whatever. You grow 10 kale plants. You probably plant them around mid-June or something. You put them in the ground mid-July. You will have, and you could probably even harvest that kale plant 1 or 2 times by September 21st. And it will still grow September 21st into October 21st a little bit, but you'll have a minimum of 10 kale bunches, and I'm talking big, way bigger than this, kale bunches that you could harvest anytime between September 21st and November, probably 23rd. And depending on your climate, as long as you don't have 2 feet of snow, and ideally your garden has sun hitting it, that is a key in detail. The more sun that hits your garden, the better these are going to do. Part of the reason these look so bad is because we have trees blocking the sun, so they don't thaw very much. So when we have cold weather, they can stay frozen for a couple days. But if you have sun hitting them, they're gonna do a lot better. And you could stretch this kale way deep into your late fall, early winter. And like I said, this applies to so many more things than what I'm talking about in this video. Increasing your harvest window is the key to this farm making money and your backyard producing a way bigger amount of food than you think in a very small space. So the whole point of this video is to show you that if you become an expert in growing the really cold tolerant crops, like this parsley, this kale, carrots, green onions, there's a huge list of them that I have other videos about. If you become an expert in growing those, and in the summer, whenever you have a wide open space in your garden that's just sitting there, you harvest a spring crop, but you have an open space and you have some kale plants lying around or some parsley plants lying around, and you know your timing, which is a whole nother topic, and you plant those crops and they become huge and luscious by the end of your growing season, you have an inventory of food that you could harvest way past your growing season, your first frost. So I just showed you how if you planted 5 feet of kale, you can add 10 weeks or 6 weeks of harvest, 10 bunches of kale whenever you want to eat them into November. Guaranteed, almost any climate. And how we use the same concept to harvest fresh carrots through the winter, basically. So we have 800 pounds of fresh carrots to harvest between now and whenever we sell out, basically. But we could harvest 100 bunches a week for basically 8 to 12 weeks. That's a lot of extra food, fresh, outside of our growing season, without a lot of extra infrastructure or fancy geothermal greenhouses or propane heat and stuff like that. This is how we can sell a profitable amount of food to a very small group of customers by just selling to the same customers over and over and over again. And the same concept works for you in your garden. You can eat fresh from your garden way past whatever your growing season is. If you could add 6 weeks to your growing season without a greenhouse or geothermal greenhouse or heat or anything like that, would that be something you're interested in? I'm hoping the answer is yes. And if you just work with your climate and your context and learn how to grow the right crops that thrive in that environment, you'd be amazed at what you can eat from your backyard in a quote-unquote difficult growing season like I have. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you're thinking. And if you're really serious about growing food, check out my free Backyard Farm Launchpad at the link in the description, where I show you how to set up a really easy no-dig garden in 4 simple steps. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next one.